I would like to say that the next session that we have is very interesting because all of us who are here, if we know what is the power that we have in taking something, that's disruptive here and taking it to India and making it a success, making it one's own and making it a success, is something that the next session is going to speak about. What I would like to mention is that I remember taking something called Maker Festival, where my children grew up going to a Maker Festival here in Santa Monica, in San Mateo. This festival, one day, I figured I'm just going to get a parking lot in Ahmedabad and set it up with some 80 volunteers and invite makers from across India to showcase their inventions. It's just one day I woke up and I said, this is what we are going to do. And once I mentioned this idea to one more person, we made it happen. We actually made it happen, and now this festival has spread across the country. So what's really exciting about the next panel is that who are these disruptors? Why are they thinking like this? Why are people like Lakshmi, Karl, Mehta, and these disruptive entrepreneurs, how did they even think about this? How did they even think that I can take something this powerful to India and make it a movement of its own? So let me introduce the next set of speakers. We have Lakshmi Pratury, who is the founder and CEO of Inc. And those of you who know Lakshmi know very well that she is a very early sort of a key DNA of something called TED Talks, right? Technology, Entertainment, Design. It's a very powerful platform for spreading ideas. Lakshmi, being a part of this early DNA of TED, I think one fine day decided, I'm going to take this to India. I'm going to go to Mysore. I'm going to get this up and running in India. And I'm going to see how India takes to the idea of paying for an ideas conference. And so Lakshmi actually took TED to India first. It was the first one was TED India in Mysore, 2009. And then after that, it became Inc. Talks, and it has spread messages of entrepreneurship and general chutzpah across the country like never before. So Lakshmi, we want to know what drove you to this brilliant idea of saying, here is something that's working beautifully with 30 million viewers, and how do we take it and replicate it in another ecosystem like India? So we want to know how you thought of that. Karl Mehta, who is a dear friend, but also another disruptor, somebody who has, he's first of all a chairman of the Quad Investors Network. He has very unusually picked up on the fact that there is a very powerful military partnership that's arising in India called Quad. It's a geostrategic, but it's also military. So the Quad, which includes Australia, US, India, and one more country, and Japan. So again, Karl, as you and Anurag and Lakshmi speak, I want to know, how did you even think of this, right? What made you wake up on one side of the bed and say, I can pull this off? And you pulled it off beautifully. We saw the kind of response you had in the World Economic Forum and things like that. So we want to know, what is it that people like you and me, all of us sitting here in the audience, can one fine day wake up and say, I can take this to another ecosystem and amplify it. So please come. And Anurag, Mairal. Anurag, are you here? Okay, good. Anurag Mairal is an adjunct professor of medicine and a director of global outreach programs at Stanford Bayer Center for Biodesign. He's also faculty fellow and lead for Technology Innovation and Impact Center for Innovation in Global Health. He's an honorary professor at the University of Cape Town, South Africa. Currently, he's a co-founder and executive vice president of Orbis Medical, a San Francisco Bay Area-based strategy consulting firm serving the global healthcare. Anurag is going to be moderating this conversation. Anurag, I want you to now get these two to spill their beans. What is the secret behind their secret sauce?
I think my role is to get out of their way and let them talk. But why don't we sit down? Let me just do a quick mention of the program that I'm part of at Stanford Biodesign. This journey of disruption that US-India corridor has been going through, we were early sort of entrants to that. 17 years back, Stanford Biodesign decided that we're going to create a medtech innovation program in India, building on the biodesign program that started at Stanford, which became very successful, is very successful. 17 years later, we have trained hundreds of innovators in India, thousands of innovators that now follow that methodology. $1 billion+ have been invested in health technology investments, and they played a major role during COVID-19. So it's a story in its own that at some point it'll be good for you to all see. Indian Cabinet Ministry actually just approved a medical devices bill that is proposing that medtech industry in India go from 11 billion today to 50 billion in 5 years. That's the fastest growth of medtech anywhere in the world, so stay tuned. So with that, let me just invite Karl first to share his journey. I think you have some slides you're going to share, or no? Maybe not. Maybe not. Okay. So Karl, do you want to respond to the prompt that that Asha actually sort of mentioned? Maybe you can talk a little bit about also your edtech journey and how that sort of led to this.
Thanks for everyone joining here. So we'll get directly to the quad because I think it's a new thing and most people don't know about it. How many of you know about quad? Maybe raise a hand. Oh, okay, great. So it was actually the idea of quad came originally in 2006, 2007 by the late Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe-san. It did not get its momentum, unfortunately, and then it got really picked up in 2018 with President Biden reviving it. And then the 4 leaders, from Japan, Australia, India, and US, they started meeting regularly. There was an annual summit that happened. You probably saw they met physically. They had a couple Zoom meetings in the first 2 years during the COVID, 2019, 2020. And then 21, 22, they met in person. So last year, they met in Tokyo. This year, they will be meeting in Australia in a few weeks. And they announced, outside of the defense and security alliance, they announced the formation of a cross-border investments to drive, particularly in critical and emerging technologies. If you've been paying attention to what happened in January in Washington, D.C., when NSA Ajit Doval met with the NSA Jake Sullivan, and there was a very comprehensive DTTI, which is a defense technologies and trade initiative that was signed, and a number of defense joint partnerships were announced. These taking that into critical and emerging technologies like AI, quantum computing, clean energy, and cybersecurity, and driving more cooperation, not just at a bilateral level between US and India, which is covered under DTTI and also ICET, but driving it at a quad level. So that was the formation they announced last year, which is the Quad Investor Network. I was lucky enough to get appointed as its chairman last year in November. I worked for President Obama about 10 years back in 2013, 2014 as a Presidential Innovation Fellow at the White House, and worked on similar stuff on large technologies at a national federal level as well as a number of international projects. And a little bit of the journey in Silicon Valley in the past 24 years has been building 3 venture-backed companies, and then last year I was happily unemployed, so I was ready to take this role. So that's the quick background on Quad Investor Network, and our core mission is to build a secure supply chain in critical and emerging technologies across the free and open democratic nations in the Indo-Pacific, because since World War II, we have seen a stable growth of prosperity and peace in Asia, but that was driven by a lot of democratic values and the United States taking the lead. But today, where we are in the world is there is a great power competition. We all feel anxious with the competition that we have to compete with individually in our businesses, right? But similar competition is currently happening at the national level, at the global level, where nations are competing. And the governments have realized that the country that leads in this new technology is the country that will set the direction and lead the world. So there is a tremendous investment that is happening by the government in build out of the next generation of technology. You saw the $52 billion CHIPS Act that the US government laid out. There's many, many more tens and billions of dollars coming in. The Indian government has announced $10 billion for semiconductor. So governments around the world are heavily investing in new technology. If you're an entrepreneur who's selling into government or not selling, I would encourage to pay attention to that, because we are now entering an era where government is going to be a big player in leading technology to be that great power.
That's great, Karl. I'm going to come back to you after Lakshmi. You know, India is now the 5th largest economy. By end of the decade, it'll be the 3rd largest economy. And in 25 years, 2nd, and some are saying it might even cross China. So there's quite a bit of opportunity here. And, so the Quad Investors Network might be a very interesting play in that. But I want to ask you, Lakshmi, you started Inc. Talks and you brought TED to India more than a decade back. I mean, India, we didn't know India was going to go through this rocket ship that we are on right now. What prompted you to bring that idea to India? And could you talk about the journey?
If you don't mind, I'm going to stand because, first of all, I'm vertically challenged. You can't see me if I sit down. Secondly, I take it upon myself that I'm an indirect ambassador of beautiful textiles that come from India, so you need to appreciate what I'm wearing. So I just want to say that I want to start with a story, and it won't take that long. It's about a couple who move into an apartment, living there, and some of you have heard this story, so I apologize. Don't give the answer away. And they look out the window every day, and there are dirty clothes hanging there. And they say, what's wrong with this person next door? They're always hanging dirty clothes. One day the wife wakes up, clean clothes. She says, honey, the husband comes running upstairs and says, see, there are clean clothes next door. And the husband looks at her and says, honey, I woke up early today and washed our windows. There's so many times we are looking at the world saying, what's wrong with it? This is not happening, that's not happening, blah, blah, blah. Because our perspective is jaded by our experience. If we can take away that and look at the world the way it exists, it's a beautiful world. And that's the same thing that happened 10 years ago, 12 years ago for me with India. I left India in my 20s. I only worked in America. I went to school here. I worked here. I never worked in India. I didn't know anybody. I would only go there and complain about the status of the airports or this or that and come back. I was like one of those pain in the butt, and what do you call them? NRIs, just horrible people. And then my dad was always asking me, what are you doing to bring the richest democracy and the largest democracy together? It's a very simple question. And I didn't have an answer. But after he passed away, I realized we always look at life as though someday, but then things don't wait for you. People die, people are born, ideas are dead. If you don't do something now, there's no answer. So the short answer to why I did this is I had no idea. You have to be a little crazy, you have to be a little dumb, and you have to be a little, in your own dream world to be able to do something like this. I thought I would go to India, took TED to India. Then Chris was very clear from the beginning, who owns TED, that we'll do only one TED India. I was like, okay, I'll go TED India, come back to America, that's it. But then I saw how one story told in front of a powerful audience can do. And I said, this is what I want to do. And then I said, we'll do Inc. for 2 years, $1 billion company, blah, blah, all this. India beats you into shape. It tells you, you don't do what you want to do here. You do what I need here. And you learn who I am. And every overnight success in India is a long night. You just heard, just before this Sudhir talk, I met Sudhir for the first time in 1999 when we wanted to be a venture capitalist in India. And he's been doing this for 23 years. And all the success he's talking about today has come after 23 5+ years of work. So the only thing I want to leave you with is that today Inc. is an institution. And it's not because I did it. It's Asha did it. We have Deepak here, we have Archana here, and we have Karl here. It's a tribe. You have to collect a tribe. And the only passion we have is how do you tell the Indian story with pride on a global stage? Because as of 2008, when I was really active with TED, etc., I was the only Indian who spoke on a TED platform. And I could see TED was going to become big. And when it becomes big, you need 50 brown faces on TED. How do we do that? And I said, let's just take TED to India. You don't need to do everything yourself. Just ride on somebody else's success and learn. And they have been an amazing teacher. And now it's Inc.'s job to make it true for Indians. So 12 years later, 500 stories, 100 million views, 6 or 7 movies that came out of it. Many people got Padma Shris, Padma Bhushans just because they became famous out of it. Is a collective journey of a tribe that came together. So I just want you to remember 3 things about India. Number 1, we still need to learn how to tell our story. We are still not very good at it. We need to learn. Number 2, don't be dissuaded by an accent or a look or something. India is a hidden gem. You have to go find it. It's not going to come find you. And number 3, at India, as Indians in India, even here, we have to work harder than ever before because it's not a done deal. You know, it can go away from us. And the only thing I want to say is that it's conscious capitalism. The way we have grown in the last 200 years is not the way we need to grow the next 200 years. If someone has an answer that has both consciousness as well as capitalism combined, it's India. Either we figure out how to take advantage of it or someone else will. So that's my journey so far.
Thank you, Lakshmi. If you want to stay on, yes. I have a follow-on question for you. And this is going to be a provocative question. And you opened the door for that. I was wondering how to frame that. You know, beautiful stories that are being told. There's an India story, which is really vibrant, really up on the upswing. This Rocketship that we are talking about. So that's one story. But there's another story that's playing itself out in the global media, which seemed completely disconnected from the India story that we experience, that I personally have experienced through Stanford, that the stories that are being told through Inc. talks. Where's the disconnect? And how do we tell our stories better so that the narratives that are being created aren't really subsuming the real stories of India?
I think that's a great question. You know, what led me to do this work is an African proverb that says that unless the lions start telling their stories, the story will always be of the hunter. So if you think about who has been telling our stories for the last 2 decades, it's BBC, it's Discovery, it's National Geographic, and thank God, somebody has been doing it. How many stories have come from Indian media that have become popular? How many stories have come where Indians living in India who's doing the work has told the stories? It's journalists telling your story, it's media telling your story. How many times have you had an Arunachalam Muruganandam, who's a 6th grade fail person in Coimbatore, telling the story of how he created the low-cost sanitary napkin by wearing one? Right? How many times, I mean, that rawness has beauty in it. It has honesty to it. It's an authenticity to it. So we need to find the unusual stories. We are only interested in hearing the success after it happens. We want to know, oh, there's a billionaire. Everybody wants the billionaire. Everybody wants the unicorn. Where was Lenskart when they started? Who asked them to tell them, what is your vision? Tell me who you are. Are we really interested in listening to the journeys? I think the Indian narrative has changed in the last 10 years because more people who are doing the work are speaking. It's not someone else experiencing their work. You know, why was Asha's Maker Fest successful? It's because Asha was not there talking about work. It's all the makers, from 8-year-old to 80-year-old people standing there and telling their stories. That's why it was successful. You need people who allow everyone to tell their story. That's what makes it successful. And I think we dedicate on only one thing, storytelling. How do you get people to tell their stories? And that one thing can be my life's work. And it will change the world if we know how to tell our stories with some level of arrogance, some level of pride, and lots of humility. And every speaker we work with, we want to make sure all three are there, and we pick them that way. So I'll tell you an example of, you said what can bring the change. In the first TED that we did, Sunita Krishnan is someone who rescues women out of prostitution and gives them a home. Been at it for a dozen years. She's been beaten up, all sorts of things. And she gave a very compelling talk of how many hundreds of thousands of women go into this trade and how every day they're tied to a bed where 50, 60 men come every day. She told this story and the audience was like dumbfounded. And I asked her one question, okay, this is the problem. What can we do to help you? And she said, I wish we had a permanent home. Because every neighborhood we go to, they throw us out. Because the minute I rescue some women and bring them, the pimps come and start attacking the house, so nobody wants us in their neighborhood. So I wish I had a permanent home. So I looked at the audience, 1,000 people who are all, each of them, very, very successful people. What can we do? One woman put her hand up and said, I will give $10,000 if 9 others commit. 50 people raised their hands. And what happens is that, we act by emotion, but then we go home and life happens. So what we decided is collect all their names and collect all that money, plus go to google.org, go to somebody, raise enough money that 18 months from the time she gave the talk, she has a 10-acre campus outside Hyderabad where she built a home for hundreds of women with security. That's the power of a great story in front of a great audience. So I just want to end by saying that things will change if we learn how to tell great stories in front of great audience and the audience take responsibility. You as listeners are not here to just get gyan. You are here to get action. So if you're inspired by something, do something about it. Only then things will change in India.
Well said, Lakshmi. Let me turn to Karl, and I'm going to ask another provocative question. We are hearing quite a bit about US-India corridor, which is part of the theme today. Many say that US-India relationship would be the most consequential geopolitical relationship for the next 2 decades. It'll determine the kind of world we live in fact. Not just for India, not just for the US, but for the rest of the world. But we have a history of US-India relationship which is very different from what we hope it becomes in the future. As you work on this Quad Investor Network and you look at the US-India corridor, can you talk a little bit about the history of this relationship and where you think it should go, especially in light of these narratives that are there? How do we actually address the distrust, the challenges that we see in the civic society and move beyond to more constructive engagement?
Great question, Anurag. So I think the US-India relation has taken a long time than what we all would have expected to get to a level of trust. And I think it goes back to the history, 70 years back when India gained its independence. We made some strategic mistakes. First was, doing this non-aligned, which we still tend to play. I mean, we in the sense, I'm speaking now on India. So India tends to do that. And the Americans or Washington, as you know, they don't like that. That's kind of ambivalent in terms of being non-aligned. They like to be sometimes either you're with us or you're not with us. And then we played that. And then obviously we chose the wrong side or maybe not the right side during the Cold War. And all that kind of created some misgivings, between Washington and New Delhi. So it has taken a very, very long time. I think in the past 7-8 years since Prime Minister Modi took the office, India has made some really great work with Dr. Jaishankar on the MEA side in kind of moving from that non-aligned to, I would say, loosely coupled, if not tightly coupled. So we're trying to now connect more with the US. So that's one big shift, right? From being, and maybe we'll never get to, India will never get to a tightly aligned, because that's not how India views the world. And that's in the right way, actually, because India doesn't want to see a bipolar world and have to pick one side. India itself is a big power with the largest population. So it's good to be friends, and India likes to be friends with as many. In fact, India wants to be friends with China as well, right? But I think this shift from the 70 years of baggage that we are carrying, and that has created a lot of misgivings on the Washington side, that is slowly we're coming out of it. I think now, just in the last couple years, or probably just in the last 12 months, the US-India relationship has kind of hit its escape velocity, and there's nothing to stop that. If there is one country that the United States is right now betting on in the entire world, and you can ask anybody in Washington, D.C., they're betting on India. If you look at all the geopolitical situation worldwide, not just in Asia, not just in South China Sea, you look at in Europe, in Western Europe, Eastern Europe, everywhere, there's only one country that US wants to partner with, which is India, right? So in the past 2,000 years in India's international relationship, I think this is the golden period. And the next 10 years, India has the opportunity to transform into a developed nation, which other countries in Asia took 30 years, 40 years. Like China took 30 years, Singapore, Taiwan, South Korea took 40 years. And it's on India to make the best out of the US. The US is rolling out red carpet to India, right? Next month we will see Prime Minister Modi on a state visit, and you will see everything that the US is doing to bring India in the fold. So that's point number one. The second thing is, we are in an innovation economy, so there's a lot of this Socrates and Plato type debates about socialism and capitalism, and I think that also held back relationship, because India took the socialist path for the first 50, 60 years. India is now moving to capitalism, but with the 1.2 billion population, we are more of a inclusive capitalism, and what Lakshmi mentioned about, compassionate capitalism, and we can move to just a very hardcore capitalism. But I think that debate is getting over because it's too theoretical, and it's more like PhD style debate. Sorry for no offense to PhDs. But I think the practical thing that, when I mentioned about the critical and emerging technology is that the governments now realize that it's all about innovation economy, okay? Everybody is just playing innovation economy, and throw away all this capitalism, socialism, and companies who are going to win in this innovation economy. And if you look at innovation economy, there is no bigger corridor than the US-India corridor. In fact, even within US-India, it's the Silicon Valley India corridor, which is the most vibrant corridor. And you can see it here in TiEcon, and you can talk to any person in Silicon Valley, they are doing some business with India. So you can look at other countries, between two countries, there is nothing comparable to the US-India corridor. So I think the innovation economy is winning, right? I get the zero signal,
yeah,
so
exactly.
okay.
Well, thank you for that, Karl. I know we are catching up for time. Why don't we stop the session here? Is there time for a question from the audience? No? Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Lakshmi and Karl. Quite a bit of conversations to be had on these topics, but narrative is important, and storytelling we need to learn, and we need to build on US-India corridor further. So thank you for that.
Thank you.